Oi oi, it's your boy, the Zviad Lazishvili of Having a Lavish Willy, Jack Slack. It's the Jack Slack podcast. We're coming at you Monday the 25th of October. We've had some fights, and they were pretty good. I enjoyed them, which is hopefully a sign of things getting back on track after the worse than off season of Norma Dumont, Mackenzie Dern main events, and 0 other fights on those cards. But this one was good, so let's talk about that. Paulo Costa, or Paulo Costa, I suppose it's supposed to be. People always think I'm talking about some guy called Paul O'Costa, like Paul O'Grady, the guy who played Lily Savage, and then had a chat show. Also, the only person who ever had a positive word to say about Cilla Black. But for people who didn't grow up in the UK, Paulo Costa versus Marvin Vettori. Honestly, I said this fight's going to be so much better than the last few weeks, and then just the weigh-in bollocks already had more promise than the last couple of weeks of fights. There's just nothing straightforward with Paulo Costa. He's a bizarre human being, and he came out a few days before the weigh-ins and said, yep, definitely not going to make weight. Not like, I'm going to struggle. He's just like, it's not happening, lads. Change it for me. And they did. You know, the UFC set up a catch weight, and I believe he even missed the catch weight. So in the end, this fight the catch weight was supposed to be 195 or something like that. And in the end, he came and, the fight ended up at 205. And that jump between middleweight and light heavyweight is a big one. You know, it's the best part of 20 pounds. Oh, no, it literally is 20 pounds, but just crazy. And I have no idea what went on. With Costa, there's always this layer of strangeness where you can't work out what's him just making up bollocks and what's him being serious. Allegedly, he had a bicep tear that prevented him from doing cardio. And you're going, what cardio were you doing previously? But then, as it turned out, in the fight, 5th round, he comes on strong after 4 rounds at a torrid pace. So Marvin Vettori, after the fight, said, he said he had trouble making the weight, but I think he lied. I think he chose not to make the weight while I was trying to make the weight, and also came in prepared for 5 rounds. Because I was thinking, while this was all going on, before we got to the fight, I was thinking, why, I thought 2 of them had rebounded from the Adesanya loss in completely different ways. Costa had collapsed and become this diva where, why would you come into, I think, only the second 5-round fight of your career? Or booking, at least. Yeah, the second 5-round booking of your career in less than the best shape of your life. He's a great finisher, but to rely on that against someone like Marvin Vettori, who's so hard to put out, would be really strange. So I was thinking, this is a terrible sign for this fight, or for Costa in this fight. Because if his plan is to go, ham in the first round, he's got 4 more rounds of Vettori. But as it turned out, it wasn't really that at all, because Vettori came out and immediately put the pace on Costa, which was a great idea. That's what you do. That's what you should be doing to Costa anyway. If you're not going to move and avoid him, put him on the back foot so he can't kick you as effectively, and so that he can't just bully you. Now, I think I looked at MMA decisions for this, and I think all the press scored it for Vettori, which was interesting because I've seen some people getting very angry about how Costa should have won, or how Jason Herzog robbed Costa or whatever. But I think most people had it 48-46. I think all the judges had it 48-46, which means if the point hadn't been deducted, it'd be 48-47, which is a close fight, but a clear winner. The story of this fight was very interesting because I came into this fight, on the pre-fight show, or the pre-fight clip I put up of the Boycast, I said, I think what's going to be interesting is Costa will probably beat him to the, Vettori will probably beat him to the punch, but it'd be interesting to see what, how he can avoid the returns, because that's what will hurt him. He'll beat him to the punch, and then if he gets winged afterwards, that's going to be where he starts losing exchanges and then rounds. But as it turned out, that didn't even matter. The fights, Fight Metric? No, UFC stats for this is really interesting. They're obviously never 100% accurate, but they watch them a couple of times, while they're tabulating the strikes landed and strikes thrown and things, and they give you a rough idea. Because I was watching this fight going, like, I don't think Vettori's actually getting away from any of these strikes at all. And then if you look at the fight metric or the UFC stats as it is now, mainly it'll confirm to you that Marvin Vettori is hard as nails. Like, the fight stats, the strike stats for this, the significant strikes is, total strikes we don't really care about, but significant strikes, because almost everything is a significant strike anyway. Significant strikes, Vettori landed at a 54% clip, which is, quite good. That means that the other guy is having trouble defending. Paulo Costa landed at 62%. That means the other guy is not moving. So to take 62% of power of all shots, and most of power shots with Paulo Costa, is absurd. But the difference is in the numbers. In this particular tally, the significant strikes, Paulo Costa landed at 62% of 260 strikes thrown, which is 163 strikes. Not many people are going to be able to take 163 strikes from Paulo Costa. Difference was that where Costa threw 260 strikes, Vettori threw almost 100 more over the course of 5 rounds with 346. Only actually landed 30 more at 190 to 160 versus Costa because his accuracy was much lower. But the amount of output he was doing and the pace he was driving really made a difference. It certainly made a difference to the perception of the fight. And I think that's doubly so because of where he was able to put Paulo Costa. Long sections of this fight were spent with Paulo Costa on the fence or backing up or, covering up and then calling him back in. But that's not Paulo Costa's A-game, and everyone knows that. Paulo Costa's, these UFC stats things for Paulo Costa fights are normally just Paulo Costa banging people out at, 100 strikes to 30 because the other guy just covers up at a certain point, especially from the power kicks to the body and the head. They'll cover up and he'll come in swinging, and then they'll just, try to survive. By putting him on the back foot and pushing him so furiously throughout this bout, Vettori made it so that he, there was never that strike differential where Costa was landing more blows and Vettori was just covering up. Everything Costa landed, Vettori came back with combinations. And that's something I really like about Vettori. The guy will throw the 1-2 at him. He'll use his left hand because he's the southpaw to parry the 2 and lean back, and then he'll come back with a 1-2-3 of his own. And it's every time that the 1-2 is thrown at him. But yeah, Marvin Vettori's tenacity. I don't want to be like Big John because I'm going to have a moan about him later. But that whole him and Mike Goldberg. It's not the size of the fight in the dog. It's the size of the dog in the fight in the dog and the dog of the dog. But this really was a case of the size of the dog in the fight and the size of the fight in the dog. Just tenacity. Marvin Vettori, if you saw Costa, he wasn't flabby. He wasn't like out of shape. He was absolutely yoked. His abs weren't as defined, but he still had abs and 205 pounds. He looked monstrous in this fight. And Vettori was, I can't remember what he weighed in at, but basically just didn't cut weight. Vettori clearly smaller, clearly not as hard a hitter, because Paulo Costa's been banging people out for years, and Marvin Vettori has 1 knockout on his record. But he put Costa on the back foot and stayed on him, like a little Wolverine, or a honey badger. Remember that meme? So much respect for that. And then when Costa did land, he kicked him in the fucking head. Marvin Vettori was reaching for his right hand, as he often does, to do the parry and then the 1-2-3 return, reaching for the right hand, gets kicked in the head instead, just takes it. And there were moments where Costa got back on the front foot, when Vettori thought he'd been eye-poked. And this is a Marvin Vettori trait. He tends to feel like he's been wronged at all times. He's a very angry fighter. If you watch when Izzy elbowed him in the head in their first fight, and Marvin Vettori's own finger went into his eye. And then Marvin Vettori's like, he poked me, and is furious about it. And I think they even stopped the fight, and Izzy's just like, oh, okay. But the takedown in the first, was it the first round? The very first takedown of the fight, Vettori's, was perfect, because he got him into a boxing exchange, and then he did that thing that I'm always talking about Ricardo Ramos doing, but loads of people do it, just duck under the guy's armpit when he throws a big loopy shot at you. And then you stand up behind his armpit, and that is literally a duck under, but in a boxing context. And you're on his back. And that's what he did. He got the body lock, returned into the mat, even though he wasn't on the mat in the first place, but just did the step around the corner of mat return. caught the wrist, tried to do the Dagestani handcuff stuff, and did good work through the remainder of that first round. But really lovely timed takedown. But I think he failed on basically every other takedown attempt he tried. And Costa got one at one point and then ended up slipping off the top of him because he was attempting a guillotine. But the fifth round is really what impressed me because Costa came out and was like, yeah, I've got to get this done now. And just, it was a return to form for Costa. He just walked him down, kicked the shit out of his body and arm and tried to kick his head and banged him with punches up and down. This is the interesting thing about Costa. Like, he came into this sport as a bodybuilder turned fighter. If you watch his fights on The Ultimate Fighter South America or whatever it was, or The Ultimate Fighter Brazil, he was just a big muscled up dude. I think his brother did MMA and then he tried taking it up as well. And he's taking people down and he's like winning by ground and pound or just top control or stuff like that. But he's learned to strike quite well and he's gravitated to techniques that are smarter than average. You know, using the body strikes over and over. And if you watch him when he takes the pressure off, he'll hit that lean back left hook really well, particularly against southpaws. He does his best work against southpaws because the right body kick goes in clean. They can't catch it on their back. And that left hook over the top surprises them when they reach out for him with a jab. But he throws that long right hook to the body as well. The ways that he goes about getting stoppages are smarter than the ways most people do. And people miss it because he's this roided up monster who says and does stupid things all the time. But yeah, Vettori got the decision. Very much deserved, I think. Costa did well. I don't know what to make of the entire thing. You don't know what this fight now counts for because both of them have come off the loss to Izzy. Vettori seemed like, yeah, I'm just going to go back to getting better as a fighter. We can, if everything goes well, I get another shot at Izzy at some point down the line. Whereas up until the fight, I was like, fucking hell, Costa's gone off the rails. But it seemed like he might have been trying something clever there, or something fast and sneaky with the weight move. I don't know what's up, because he's at a good camp with Eric Albarracin. Bit sketchy that all went the way it did. But honestly, it just got up to 205. It was the pace and the gas tank that was getting Vettori into the fight and giving Costa trouble. If he starts unloading on the 205ers like that, they're gonna melt. And especially with the body work he does, and especially with the kicks that he's got. How many good kickers are there at 205? The only problem is that when you get into 205, sometimes you just find that they are monstrously big men compared to even these big middleweights. Like Luke Rockhold, we were all like, what a gigantic dude. He should be fighting at light heavyweight. Goes up to light heavyweight, and just his bones look smaller than Jan Blakowicz's, But then welterweights like Rumble Johnson and Thiago Santos can end up there, and you go, yeah, well, that makes sense. They look all right in that weight class. So really, you have to wait until you've seen them in the ring at that weight with someone of that weight. But I think for Costa, you're. I don't think he's going to learn the tools to be able to catch Israel Adesanya. Because I think Costa's pressure fighting, if he could pressure fight really well and cleverly, I think he could give Israel Adesanya a lot of trouble, just with his tools and the things that he does well. But there's a lot of stuff involved in doing that, like ring positioning, feinting, not falling for all of Izzy's stuff, not kicking into the closed side over and over again, getting your leg caught and countered with combinations. And I think if he just went up to light heavyweight, you don't have to deal with clever strikers like that for the most part. Oh, I suppose before we move on, we better talk about, we better touch on the point deduction, because DC came out and was like, no, it wasn't right. He didn't give him enough warnings beforehand. I think at this point, everyone has been warned in the back. Everyone has been warned before the fight not to poke the eyes. And then in the fight, the referee will say, fingers, watch your fingers. And the ref did. It was Jason Herzog, and he took a point. And I think it was deserved. It was the first bad poke, but you shouldn't be granted 2 bad pokes before you get a point deducted. Nor should it matter if it was deliberate or not. Just they're fouls. Start penalising the fouls, and suddenly these accidental fouls will magically clear up. And there were a couple of point deductions on this card, and I liked him. Chris Toyoni did a good one. I laugh at him often because he sort of ambles around the cage and is often in the way of the action. There was a great one the other day where someone sprawled and Cristiano tripped over their leg and ended up like on all fours over the other side of the cage while the fighters were busy grappling. But I thought that was a good one. Who was that? Hold on. Was that Caceres? Oh no, it might have been Grant versus Trinaldo. I forget. But yeah, there were a few on that one. There was a lot of cheating on this card, actually. The fight between Randa Marcus and Lavinia Souza, which I'm not going to touch on at length because it was two girls throwing each other into the scarf hold and getting stuck there or coming up on the back. It was WMA embodied, but they did both headbutt the shit out of each other in that fight. Randa Marcos threw like a 5-punch flurry running at the girl, missed all of them, and then just careened in behind her head and smashed it into Souza's face. But yeah, it's like the Peter Yan shit. You can't be surprised when if you keep fouling, you get a point taken and then be like, hey, he should have been more lenient. That was only my second foul, you know? I pokes is the glove shit. You know, the UFC said in 2009, we're working on it. And then quietly didn't do anything about the gloves. You can get curved gloves. Pride used curved gloves. I'm pretty sure Shuto gloves are curved. You know, it's strange because like the whole hand points up. This like you don't have your fingers splayed towards the eyes. I was watching Petian versus Douglas Silva D'Andrade the other day, and literally his fingers are pointed straight at D'Andrade's eyes. He's not moving them towards D'Andrade, but his arm's out there straight so that D'Andrade can't move forward without skewering his own eyes. But yes, they say like, oh, fingers up or whatever, and a lot of fighters will wrap. I mean, particularly from boxing, you know, you wrap your wrist so it's basically solid, so that you can't actually bend your wrist back up and point your hand at the ceiling. Some MMA fighters aren't wrapping their wrists as heavily now, and some don't even wrap their wrists at all. I know that Rory McDonald doesn't. I had heard that TJ Dillashaw doesn't sometimes, but yeah, the simple way to fix it is to take points. So what else was good on this card? I said I had a lot of fun, and I'm struggling. Oh, Gregory Rodrigues versus Jun Yong Park was bizarre. Gregory Rodrigues comes out, and he's throwing a jab and then a right straight to the body, and I'm going, nice. And then he throws, you know, he goes to throw in the right straight to the body again, and he ducks in on the leg and gets the takedown and starts dominating from top position. I'm like, nice. Something I really like about the right straight to the body, you know, you saw it from Junior Dos Santos most notably, but the right straight to the body sets up punches upstairs because the opponent will reach for you. You know, they're going to try and punch you while you're lowering your head onto their punches. So JDS used to do right straight to the body, and then he'd right straight to the body, but instead he'd lean his head off to the left side so that whatever you threw at his head while it was coming down to chest level missed, and then he'd throw the overhand across the top instead. That's how he knocked out Cain Velasquez. That's how he knocked down Mark Hunt a load of times while Mark Hunt was trying to counter left hook. But the same can be applied to grappling. You know, if you want the guy to open up his arms so that you can get in on his hips and sides, changing levels and punching his body will encourage him to swing back at you while your head's lowering. But also the level change itself is being ignored now because it's a level change for a punch, and the level change from the punch and to get on the guy's hips can be almost identical if you're good at doing both. Rodrigues looked fire on the ground. Young Park survived. Second round, Rodrigues goes for the right straight to the body and gets dinged in the chin as he does it, and I was like, that's not great. Yes, there's the risk with changing levels and punching the body. And yeah, then it's just an ugly, sloppy brawl as they swing back and forward, and somehow Rodrigues gets the knockout. I mean, there was a bit of a mess, but I was very impressed with Rodrigues up until the point that he got chinned. Wasn't super impressed with him after he got chinned. It was basically like he was allowed back into that fight by Park not being very good. You know, if you've got someone on the fence who's just swinging back wildly whenever you swing at them, you just shoulder fake him and let him swing and then hit him with a couple of counter punches, or you hit him in the body, or, you know, there's 100 things that you can do that aren't just, well, when I step in and swing, he's going to swing back at me, you know, like, he's half conscious. Throw a fucking feint. Throw his timing off, you know, get him swinging and then hit him afterwards. What else was good? Grant Dawson versus Ricky Glenn I really enjoyed, actually. I saw a lot of people not enjoying this, because Grant Dawson was quite a lot like, who was Robbie Lawler's teammate who fought in on that Bellator card a little while ago? It wasn't Logan Storley. Maybe it was Logan Storley. Really shit hot wrestler. And, like, he took the guy down at will, but the guy had a good butterfly guard. This wrestler couldn't pass it. So, yeah, he was just useless. And then in the third round, the other guy actually threw some strikes and landed, and really like did the only effective offense of the fight on a tired whoever it was, Logan Storley possibly. But Grant Dawson has been pretty hyped, very strong wrestler. Ricky Glenn, the prospect slayer, basically. Like it's his fight with Gavin Tucker was it's one of my favorites of all time. Just he battered him. And on paper, he had no reason to, but he's a strong wrestler, strong grappler, decent striker. But the idea was like, how's he going to match up against this awesome wrestler in Grant Dawson? And in the first round, you could see what he was trying to do. He was squirrely and clever, but Grant Dawson was able to take him down and control him. Second round, he starts having more success. So like Grant Dawson shoots in on a takedown, and Rick Glenn just rice bails him over the top, just rolls through on the takedown. You know, very little effort, but just nice timing, and starts coming up in a scramble. Really cool moves from Rick Glenn, like on the bottom. When he was in side control on the bottom, so Dawson was on top of him. And typically in side control, you want to be putting shoulder pressure into the guy, which means you like, with the hand that's by their head, you put it under their back, you reach into their armpit, normally like middle finger in the armpit is what they say, and you pull their back towards you along the floor and use your shoulder to turn their head away from you. So that really limits their ability to bridge into you because their head's pointing away. And from there, you can start like opening up their near elbow with your knee and progressing into all the attacks that are available from side control. But really, it just kills a lot of their escapes. So when you watch good grapplers, when the opponent's passing their guard, one of the things they will do is make sure that that hand never goes around their head. They never want the shoulder of justice is how it's described from like a half guard pass, but the cross face with the shoulder pressure, they want to avoid that at all costs. So a lot of good grapplers will keep like two hands on the hand that the opponent is trying to wrap around their head. Rick Glenn ended up on the bottom, and the guy, Dawson, did have good shoulder pressure and the cross face in. And Rick Glenn did something that, it's quite hard to peel the cross face off once it's in. What I sometimes do, and what you can do, is like put both hands underneath their shoulder, like treat it as a shot put, and just push it with your hands up and grind your face down inside it so it's on their chest, and then that makes it very hard for them to turn your head and control you, and then you can start going to your knees, or going belly down and coming up on your knees to pick up a single or something like that, or return to guard. But what Rick Glenn was doing was something very funny that I have never seen before. He'd keep one hand in the armpit, and then he'd reach behind his head with the other hand and like grab all four fingers and peel the hand that was behind his head over the front of his head. So he'd just peel it off, which I suppose exposes you to the Americana. Like they might reach across your body and go for the Americana, but it just meant that he could pull the guy's hand in front of his face, and then he'd go for that Marcelo Garcia sit up and post the arm in the armpit escape, and he hit it several times. But I'd never seen someone just reach behind the head and pull the hand off like that. I've seen it on the feet, like Nicky Rod does it sometimes, but who is it? The Hillbilly Hammer. Is it Jacob Couch or Jason Couch? But I think he's a brown belt, but he's had mad success at the highest levels in no-gi. Just a very tenacious guy. And you see him peel them off the back of his head, but he also, like, sometimes he wants people to grab the back of his head on the feet, so he'll grab their wrist and pull it up behind his head, and they'll just, like, anchor to his head to try and keep their hand in one place. They'll be like, oh, I've got a grip at least, But very cool, and Rick Glenn did lots of cool stuff in this match. And in the last round, Dawson was just fucked, basically. He was fatigued. And Rick Glenn rolled through, got on top of him, and started battering him. And in the last few seconds, like, he probably could have chased a stoppage because the guy was not responding to the ground and pound. But he looked for a Darce choke from side control instead. And as the horn goes, he's like, he's out. And he lets go of the choke immediately. Grant Dawson's head bounces off the mat, and he starts sitting up to go, I'm not out, I'm not out. And then he falls over again. And then James Krause, his cornerman everyone's cornerman it seems, comes in, picks him up, pushes him to the fence and makes sure he's standing on the fence so the ref can't be like, oh, maybe he was out. It was a close thing. Like, if it had gone a few seconds longer, yeah, he'd probably been out. I mean, if it had gone 2 more rounds longer, which is one of the sad things about this, because like neither of these two is anywhere near whiffing a 5-round fight at any point in the near future. But if this had been a 5-round fight, Rick Glenn would have killed him. But yeah, I thought a very fun fight. Maybe that's the grappling nerd in me, but I just thought watching Rick Glenn scramble and keep getting back up and keep making the guy work was fun enough in itself, you know. And Dawson completing the takedowns was interesting. It was just that he gassed, and then that's what you want to see. You want to see Rick Glenn make this guy work so much that he then can beat him with experience later on. But it went majority draw, which was 2 rounds for Dawson on 2 judges' scorecards, and then the third round a 10-8 for Rick Glenn, which I'm absolutely fine with. Some people complain about it, but I think there's room for context in like that, because like when you say like think of it, you know, what is a 10-8 round for you? I mean, I've seen some razor thin rounds, or like even 10-10 rounds scored 10-9 because they just go, oh, I've got to pick someone. And then some 10-9 rounds that are really obviously one guy. So, you know, there's got to be room for scope in a 10-8. If it was much more dominant than the 2 10-9 rounds, then yeah, fair enough. In terms of impressive grappling snoozers, Jessica Rose Clark versus Jocelyn Edwards. I was talking about her last week. I said I was impressed by Jessica Rose Clark's recent fights, her strength in the clinch and her use of knees and elbows. She comes out immediately, gets the takedown, and then just pursues the takedown constantly. Good guard passing, or serviceable enough. It just seemed like Jocelyn Edwards didn't really know what to do. But like she'd get mount, and she just kept trying to walk up the elbow, you know, trying for the head and arm choke or whatever. But you're in mount. Fucking elbow her, you know, like just completely. Despite having so much success getting her down and doing it over and over again, just completely scared to take any risk at all in pursuit of a finish. But a win's a win. Caceres versus Sungwoo Choi was fun enough. Really just a well-timed level change, or reactive double, or whatever you want to call it, as Sungwoo Choi was blitzing in along the fence, turned him around, got on his back, and got the rear naked choke. Once again, Alex Caceres showing flashy shit on the feet, not being that great on the feet, but being surprisingly good as a grappler. Francisco Trinaldo versus Dwight Grant, another bad eye poke in this one, or two. Yeah, just Trinaldo being Trinaldo. Well-timed overhand lefts, and he did it really well. He basically gave up the first round. The second round, he goes jab, jab. He's a southpaw against an orthodox fighter, so he goes double jab, dip down for the overhand left, grabs the hips, goes onto the back. Having a lot of trouble with the range, actually, Trinaldo. This is something that's going to be interesting, because he was a big lightweight. He's given up the cut because it's hard, because he's old. And now he's having to deal with people who are taller and longer than him pretty consistently. Well, I mean, like this one and the last one. But yeah, I mean, basically, like he at lightweight, he'll control range, control exchanges, controlled pace, and then time a good overhand left. It's going to be a bit harder if the other guy can poke him from so much further out than he's used to. And then he got dropped or bundled over. I can't remember what happened, but he was on the bottom in the third round, I think it was, and he did the Damian Maia single, which is absolutely dope, which is where if you're in full guard, as we're always saying, full guard, absolute death in MMA, not because you'll get killed there, like nobody actually stops anyone from full guard anymore, but you are killing the clock. Like, it's anytime you're in full guard, there's this like, well, it could be worse, when in fact you should be like, I'm on the bottom, I'm losing, de facto. Like, unless you have amazing elbows from the bottom, you are losing. So what Damian Maia used to do is he'd go 2-on-1 on one of the opponent's wrists, you know, two hands grabbing the wrist. He'd open his legs, slide the opposite, whichever knee was on the opposite side to the arm he was grabbing, he'd slide that knee in. He'd put the same side foot between their legs, and he'd sit up into half guard on the underhook and onto the single leg. Gamble Dub did a good thing about it, but you can watch any Damian Maia fight, basically, when he ends up on the bottom. If he doesn't butterfly sweep him, he uses the 2-on-1 and the single leg. And Trinaldo comes up on the single leg really well. Well, he comes up on the single leg, and the other guy, Dwight Grant, starts backing up, and Francisco Trinaldo one-handed shoves him across the cage from a seated position. Old man strength, man. Old man strength. Nick Negu Marianu versus Ike Villanueva. This is weird. This is like 205 in a nutshell. You know, Sam Alvey's just been booked for his, what will be his 8th not win in a row. If he loses or if he gets a draw. He's 0-6-1 in his last 7. And he's still here because it's 205 and it's shit. But Ike Villanueva, he's lost more fights than Nick Negu Moreno has ever had. And even in the UFC, he's not looked that impressive. His one win is over Vinicius Moreira, who fucking sucked. But yeah, he just looked slow, sluggish, got caught, dropped, fell down on his into turtle basically. And Negu Moreno just hammers him in the back of the head. Because you can get away with it. Who was the ref here? Oh, it was Toyoni. Yeah, this is always anytime I put up a clip of someone blatantly striking the back of the head on Facebook, there is a ref on my Facebook who comes in and is like, he starts from the position that the ref was right. He's always like, well, it's a good thing all you guys can see that and not Dan Mergliata, who's 3 feet away. And you're like, no, well, yeah, refs do miss things. Like, why can you not just admit that? But he has to watch this footage of the guy getting blatantly elbowed in the mohawk and pretend that it's connecting on the ear or something like that. But this one in particular is just obvious, hammer fists to the back of the head, and it's what Vitor Belfort used to do. If he hurt someone and they were face down, he'd punch him in the back of the head because the ref isn't going to stop it and say, that guy gets a chance to start from the feet or that's a DQ. The ref's going to go, well, he was out anyway. And there's the trick, because when it's talking about the back of the head, people go, he was out anyway. But anything else is like, well, he could have got back into that. You've seen people get back into it. Finishing people is hard. But if you just slam an elbow or a hammer fist into the brainstem, which we all agree is an overwhelmingly devastating strike, which is why it's banned in combat sports in the first place, and you're willing to be like, well, there were 3 legal ones and 2 illegal ones. If it makes that much difference that one of them is illegal, then that should matter. You can't be like, oh, well, it was mid-flurry. But they do. So just do what Vitor Belfort did, most notably against Akiyama, who, was a massive cheat in his own right, in much worse ways. Like, he'd grease himself up, both in an international judo career and in MMA. And against an ancient Kazushi Sakuraba, he still felt the need to smother himself in a full bottle of Olay. But Belfort knocks him down. He goes down onto his hands and knees, turtling, and Belfort just punches straight down on the back of his head, 3 or 4 times to get the finish. I think he did the same to Rich Franklin, didn't he? Anyway, back of the head doesn't actually exist in MMA, if you ask the refs. Mason Jones versus David Inama was basically what you'd expect from someone who's up against a late replacement. Fought a little bit safer than usual. Still, Mason Jones is one of those fighters who, when you watch Prime Joe Frazier, you go, damn, nice head movement as he slips a couple of punches, and then he still gets cracked way more than most fighters do. It just doesn't make sense. I suppose if you get hit that often, you're going to slip some of them, but yeah, he's a weird mix of competent boxing and then just getting lit up. But a lot of this was just him ducking into clinches and Inama accidentally giving up his back. It was very interesting because he's hitting things like he'll get the underhook along the fence, the underhook pin, and he'll step inside of Onama's legs and throw him across the Habib throw, the DC throw. James Krause calls it the DC1 or the DC2 or whatever. But, it tells you how devastating or how hard it is to deal with things like that, because James Krause is in Onama's corner and he's like, fuck. But James Krause teaches these techniques. He's got a whole DVD on them or an instructional on them. His team do very well offensively with these techniques. It's very hard to deal with. You can hit these hip throws or modified hip throws along the fence, and they're very, very strong. And either you throw the guy over like Mason Jones did in the first round, or you start throwing him and he releases the whizzer, puts his hands to the floor to balance and stay upright, and you got on his back. Ricci versus Oliveira I skipped. Pickett versus Staropoli I didn't skip, but it was not very interesting. This was one of those fights that I did quite like, that Staropoli would initiate every grappling exchange. He'd shoot a takedown at the start of every round, and Jamie Pickett would stuff the takedown and then take down Staropoli as a response. And then maybe they'd get back to the feet or whatever. But it's a really nice way of hammering home, because some judges will be like, beautiful takedown defense, we do score that, and other judges won't score it at all. But if you stuff the takedown and then take the guy down, that really hammers home that you're dominating the wrestling. Jai Herbert versus Karma Worthy. Just standard Karma Worthy fight. And nice for Jai Herbert to get another one in the win column. But this was interesting because in the lead up, you're going, well, Jai Herbert really lives and dies by that 1-2. It's a beautiful 1-2, but he doesn't have an awful lot of other tools, the 1-2 and the odd head kick. And it's the timing and the rhythm manipulation, a couple of nice feints. Karma-worthy, very, very tricky and very good against straight hitters. And if he can get guys into kickboxing matches, he's very competent at making them fuck up their distance and countering well and lowering their rate of activity. He's very much a spoiler in that regard. One of those fighters who's so awkward that you stop doing what you normally do. And then you always have to caveat that with Karma-worthy has a crap chin. Like, he's just, he's got this really weird herky-jerky style, which works really well. But I can't think of a fighter who's so competent, like diffusing good technicians, but for whom the answer for every opponent will be, oh, just go ham. Just get retarded at one point and it'll work. And that's what Jai Herbert did. He just, at a certain point, he just went head kick and a flurry of 5 punches. And the head kick, like, sort of, it went forearm and head, and then the punches were on the forearms and the head, but Worthy just can't take them. It's just sort of the sad part of being Karma-worthy. If he had Vettori's chin, he'd be unstoppable. Jeff Molina versus Daniel Da Silva was fun. Da Silva beat him up with kicks in the first round. And then Molina steps down the inside of a low kick and hits him on one leg, batters him. This happened a few times recently, and on this card in particular. Guys throwing kicks from too close in. Caceres did it with a body kick. And just eating the rear-handed straight up the centre. It's the best counter. It's the easiest counter. And it's fucking devastating because you're on one leg and you're getting your head snapped back. You're going to fall over one way or another. Like, even if the guy doesn't connect well, you're going to fall over. And then Big John will score them as knockdowns, as he did for MVP against Lima. But on the subject of Big John, I sat through 3 whole fucking fights of his commentary this weekend. Fuck no am I watching a whole Bellator card. I think I would die if I watched a whole Bellator card. My brain would just, like mad cow disease where the prions turn your brain to sponge. I think that's what happens if you listen to too much Big John. It's the only way that I can reconcile the state of Bellator fandom. But anyway, Bellator went to Moscow. They had the Moscow commissioner of MMA, Fedor, in the main event against Tim Johnson, who's been on a little bit of a tear lately, except that he lost to whoever Fedor's heavyweight protege is in a title fight, I think. Was it a title fight? Who knows what's happened with that fucking title. At any rate, Fedor versus Tim Johnson. Tim Johnson just stood there and let Fedor hit him. Slowly walked on to right hands. It was tragic. On the upside, Fedor, when he lets his hands go, I mean, he always lets his hands go, but sometimes he'll throw like one big overhand right at a time and look like shit, like when he was very clearly panicking against Bigfoot Silva. And then other times, like when he's consciously boxing, he looks very sharp. I mean, against the ghost of Pedro Hizo, he's hooking off the jab, he's body jabbing, he's throwing beautiful combinations, and somewhere between those two is really good, Fedor. And Fedor did that here. Like, he landed the finishing sequence, absolutely gorgeous. Tim Johnson's trying to land this short right hook as a southpaw. He steps in for it. Fedor dips and throws the right straight. So he lands the counter and dips under the right hand of Johnson. Comes up with the left hook, and as he's landing the left hook, he's winding up his right swing behind him, and he lands that on the end. So it's a 3-piece combination. Every punch landed. Johnson went down like a sack of shit, and it was a beautiful knockout. And you're always very happy when this happens because it's nice for Fedor to do a little bit of vintage Fedor. But then you're also very cautious because while this would be a perfect win to retire on, your protege just beat Tim Johnson and is now the champion or whatever, and then you beat Tim Johnson while he's still regarded as like the number 2 heavyweight in Bellator. Perfect time to retire. But he won't. He'll come back and he'll get knocked out by Fabio Maldonado in a rematch or something like that. Yeah, just dreadful that he will keep fighting. But, happy that he won that fight, I'm never going to be sad about Fedor winning. Although I sort of am, because of the implications of what that means. But co-main event was Said Soma versus Vitaly Minakov. Soma's, I think, short notice replacement. They wanted to do Javier Valia. Minakov was the Bellator champion for quite a while. It was quite promising. People were like, was he the next Fedor? but he had issues with the company. They fell out quite badly. Ended up fighting in Russia for a little while. Best of both worlds here. He's in Bellator and Russia. But last time we talked about how against Czech Congo, he was completely exposed, basically. It's very rare to have a weakness exposed, as in, like, people are always using the word exposed, but it's normally like, oh, Justin Gaethje's wrestling exposed by Khabib. And you're like, oh, yeah, no, just come out and do Khabib, and that'll work. But it's very rare that someone like, something like this, where literally circling to Minakov's left, he doesn't have any weapons. He's looking for the right overhand. He's looking for this step-up left low kick, which seems to be coming from his left side, but it doesn't really cut wide enough to stop the guy circling. So if people circle to his left, he's completely fucking lost. He'll amble after them, trying to throw the right hand across himself. And he did that against Czech Congo and looked like absolute shit. In this one, Said Soma didn't really do a lot for the first 2 rounds, but Minakov's just following him around and losing him. And Big John's going on about how, like, oh, he's cutting the cage so effectively here. And you're like, no, he isn't. He's doing fucking nothing. Soma's circling out once in every 2 times he's cornered. Sometimes he'll circle the wrong way and get hit, but every time he circles left, he's absolutely fine. The closest Minakov came was when he threw a spinning back fist, and I think that might have been how he popped his fucking finger out. I had to call a timeout with the referee to pop his finger back in, without remembering that if you call a timeout, that's a TKO. If it's not an illegal technique that's happened to you, you can't stop the fight. So Soma wins. I've heard really good things about Soma. Someone was on Reddit saying that they trained in the South Florida area, and Soma is like an athletic freak in the gym, which is hilarious because he's a bit, he's a puffy lad at the moment. But apparently he was training with Dean Thomas, and he's struggling to, he can't make it to the ATT's main academy very easily. One of those guys who needs someone to do something for him, like give him a job somewhere or open up a gym closer to him to allow him to actually succeed in this. And then the only other one that anyone was talking about, oh, Kirill won. Good for him. He beat the guy with as many losses as he has wins. Scottish heavyweight Rab Trudale. But Usman Nurmagomedov fought a warm body. We were like, Patrick Piatilla or whatever it is. To not be ranked on Tapology is sus. But this guy, if you watch this fight, they're going on about how Usman is unstoppable and stuff. And you're just going, you're matching him against people who can't fight. This dude looked like he had no idea what he was doing. It wasn't like he was overwhelmed or by the reputation of Nurmagomedov. Like, yeah, you could be skittish because of the Nurmagomedov reputation, but it doesn't make you forget how to move your feet or like how to stand. I think the best path for success in MMA financially is to be tangentially related to a genuinely great fighter and let Bellator pick you up and feed you cans. Look at how they've treated SBGI. On the off chance Conor McGregor shows up. Anyway, that's that done. Yeah, not a bad week of fights. And then there was tons of other stuff that we're actually going to have to save till the boycast because I've not watched it yet. Glory, the fight between Verhoeven and Ben Sadiq was supposed to be really good. There was something else on this weekend. There was there was the Who's Number One card with Gordon Ryan returning against someone who no one had ever heard of. In basically because they got him someone no one had ever heard of, like a UFC guy with 1 win in the UFC, who was 40 pounds lighter than Gordon Ryan. They basically just made it an exhibition, and Gordon was going to try and get as many submissions as possible. It was decent fun, but there were a load of other matches on that card that actually mattered. So all of that for the boycast, and then of course this week we've got fucking tons of stuff happening. Most importantly, you got UFC 267, Blachowicz versus Teixeira. You got Yan versus Sandhagen now, which is a great matchup. You got Lee versus Chimaev, and watch Lee creep up the rankings this week. And then you got Makachev versus Hooker, which should be fun. But more than that, you've got a one championship with Stamp Fairtex fighting on for some reason. You got PFL are doing what they generously advertised as the biggest night in MMA history, which is the tournament final between Kayla Harrison and Taylor Guardado. The reactions to that were great. The best quote I saw was, who'd have thought the biggest fight in MMA history would happen on a Wednesday? And then we got the Contender Series as well, so I'll cover that. But, and there was also a Ryzen at the weekend. That was the other one I was going to mention. And a KSW, which was apparently really fun. They had Bombardier versus Mariusz Pudzianowski. So tons to catch up on even before we get into like the fun of the pay-per-view. And I want to get this Petr Yan Filthy Casuals guide out. It might end up being a quicker one because there's so much to watch and do. But yes, lots coming. If you want to get in on the Boycast and listen to all that and support the podcast and get in on the articles I write as well, sign up to the Patreon. If you want to send an email to the podcast, jackslackpodcast@gmail.com. And if you want to see what I'm writing at any time, fightprimer.com. I am your boy, Jack Slack, deducting points for every single eye poke bless.